Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
At a minute past 9, a very good evening to you. A warm welcome. This is indeed Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African perspective, live from our Auckland Park headquarters here in Johannesburg, South Africa, as we bring you 60 minutes of the latest news here and abroad, from the heart of Africa to all the corners of the globe. One world, countless stories as we bring you the views, the voices and the perspectives that matter. Remember, you can stream live onto the program on OpenView channel 628. We are also on the DSTV audio bouquet 802. All you have to do is download the the SABC Plus app, and you can stream in live. And of course, you are most welcome to let us know what's happening in and around your world. We'd certainly like to get your perspective on some of the stories that we're covering, and also to help us understand what is happening in your world, in and around your community, and the issues that are driving where you are. 063 406 9126. That's the hotline number that you can reach us on WhatsApp. And of course, we also stream live on YouTube if you'd like to hear some of our top stories today. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. 60 minutes of the very latest news here in Africa and beyond. Let's go straight to those top stories. Protesters in Kenya have been attacked with whips and clubs as they called for justice after the death of an activist in police custody. Kenyan police say Albert Ojwang died from self-inflicted wounds, but state pathologists say there is evidence that he was assaulted. His killing has caused widespread anger across the country, as the BBC's Anne Sway tells us.
There were pockets of violence in the center of Kenya's capital when groups of young men riding motorbikes and carrying whips and clubs attacked protesters. Videos have shown the men seemingly working side by side with police, who have fired tear gas to try and disrupt the demonstrations. The clashes came as dozens of protesters gathered to call for the sacking of the deputy chief of police. He made a complaint against a young teacher who was then arrested and later died in custody.
And more on Kenya. Kenyan Parliament's Finance Committee rejecting a proposal to grant the Revenue Authority unrestricted access to taxpayers' data, citing privacy concerns. The committee says current laws already allow the access with a court warrant, making the proposal unnecessary. Nhlanhla Mahlangu reports.
Kenya's Finance Minister John Mbadi has defended the measure, saying it would help curb tax evasion, particularly by wealthy individuals exploiting legal protections to conceal financial information. Mbadi was not immediately available to comment on the committee's decision. President William Ruto's government has been trying to increase tax collection to help keep up with the growing debt repayments. Last year's finance bill was followed by deadly riots against tax increases. Mbadi has said the government will not impose new taxes or raise existing ones in this year's bill. For Channel Africa News, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
And to West Africa, where Senegal has delayed releasing its budget execution reports for the past 2 quarters until June 23rd, as the new administration works through to restore investor confidence following a hidden debt scandal. It's unclear when the reports are initially due. The IMF suspended disbursements under its program with Senegal last year after the country admitted to misreporting debt and deficit figures. Nosipho Zuma has more.
The International Monetary Fund, whose financing is seen as key for the West African nation, said no talks on a new arrangement can start until the case is resolved. A review of government finances by Senegal's Court of Auditors in February found Dakar had understated its deficit by up to 7 percentage points of GDP a year, pushing the end 2023 debt ratio to about 100% of GDP versus the 74% the previous government had reported. The Finance Ministry says that the new release date of its budget is to guarantee the sincerity and reliability of the figures.
And the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, is set to conduct an on-site visit to South Africa as part of the final step before the country can be considered for removal from the grey list. Since being grey-listed in 2023 over weaknesses in anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing framework, South Africa has made progress, meeting all 22 recommended actions in the agreed action plan. The National Treasury Advisor Ishmael Momaniat has praised the stepped-up efforts by law enforcement agencies.
Remember, we were grey-listed for a period of just over 2 years. And what FATF assessed was during this time, every 4 months they assess whether there was an increasing trend in both investigations and in prosecutions. And these were the two most difficult action items that we had to achieve. And we expected them to be only dealt with towards the end because they weren't just interested in an increase from one reporting cycle to another, in other words, every 4 months. They wanted to see this increase being sustained throughout this period.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
It's 9:08. We continue with Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa. Remember, we'd like to hear your point of view. Let us know your perspective on some of the stories that we're covering. And of course, let us know what is happening in and around your world. So reach us on Instagram at Channel Africa 1, as well as TikTok, YouTube, and we are on Facebook. All you have to do is just write to Channel Africa. Now, let's start with the Middle East. There have been calls for a ceasefire as tensions between Israel and Iran continue to escalate. This comes after Israel launched an attack on Iran last Friday in a bid to knock out its nuclear program. Iran retaliated with aerial strikes targeting Israel. In Iran, at least 224 people have been killed since hostilities began, while in Israel, 24 people have been killed. Meanwhile, world leaders attending the G7 have called for a de-escalation of the conflict, citing that Iran is a source of instability and that Israel has the right to defend itself. Bonolo Maribe has more.
Israel and Iran continue to trade deadly airstrikes despite calls for a de-escalation. Iran's UN ambassador, Amir Saeed Iravani, insists that the country acted in self-defense.
The Israeli regime has once again demonstrated that it is the foremost enemy of truth. It holds the disgraceful record of being the world's leading perpetrator of violence against journalists and media professionals. In response to this barbaric attack and aggression, Iran exercised its inherent right to self-defense in line with Article 51 of Charter. Our response was defensive, targeted, and proportionate.
On the margins of the G7 summit in Canada, French President Emmanuel Macron talked about the possibility of a ceasefire.
There is an offer that has been made, especially to have a ceasefire and to initiate broader discussions. And I think this is a very good thing.
However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israel has to remove any threat posed by Iran by any means possible.
We had the peace talks. We gave it a chance. We've clenched our teeth. We did everything we could to enable President Trump to negotiate the desired result, and that would have been preferable for us and I think for everyone. But we saw in the course of the negotiations, while they were negotiating with the United States, the Supreme Leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, tweeted almost every day, "Death to Israel." The talks were merely a facade.
Meanwhile, protesters have called for peace between the countries.
Iranians have gathered here at the Toronto City Hall to call for a ceasefire and to ask for Israel's unprovoked aggression to stop on Iran. We have families and loved ones back home who are being killed, and we want it to stop. We've seen what has happened in Gaza, in Lebanon, and we don't want the same thing to happen to Iran.
And as much as they've said that they're not hitting civilian targets, civilians are being hit. Unfortunately, what happens during war is that the truth starts getting a bit lost. So now we just want people to know that the Iranian people don't want this war. Our government, unfortunately, has also sparked this war. So as much as we're opposed to our government, we want to shed light that the people of Iran want peace. We just want to live in peace and freedom.
Meanwhile, Israel's military says it had killed Ali Shatmani, who they identified as Iran's most senior military commander. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
An investigation by South Africa's non-profit organization Open Secrets has found that telecoms company MTN has played a role in shutting down the internet during elections and wars in Sudan, Cameroon, Iran, Afghanistan and Uganda, thus enabling governments to silence the opposition.
Interestingly, this isn't just unique to MTN. I think the report also looks at Vodacom DRC as being a proponent of one of these violations, particularly in shutting down the internet during the elections in 2018 and 2019. Autocratic regimes are able to utilize the licenses that they have with these telecom companies, basically to, suppress political dissent. And the result is that many people are left without connectivity. And not only does this affect people's ability to communicate with their loved ones and access vital emergency services, but also at a very basic level of access to information.
The Open Secrets investigator, Lou Forno Uduli.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Weekdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Central African Time.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix. Kwa nini wanamuziki wengi sana wa kizazi kipya pale wanapofanya muziki?
Ni kwa sababu kitu cha kwanza ambacho naweza nikaongelea nikagusia zaidi sana ni kusema kuwa wale wasanii wanapotoa ngoma yao ya kwanza ikiwa kama kahiti kidogo tu, wanaanza kutamba mitaani, wanaonekana kama wapo majuu zaidi sana.
Kuna wanamuziki wengine ambao wanakimbilia kwa waganga wa jadi. Hivi muziki na dawa vinaendana?
Kitu cha kwanza naweza nikasema ni kuwa muziki na dawa haviendani. Lakini muziki ni kipaji.
Kuna watu wengine wanashutumu wasanii wengine kwamba wanaroga.
Wanaroga, wale wasanii kama wanaroga ni kutokujiamini tu. Lakini kitu cha muhimu sana ni kipaji.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sipiso Magwetu.
Heavy fighting in the Sudan is intensifying due to the continued influx of weapons, indicating that the conflict is far from over. That's according to the UN's independent international fact-finding mission for Sudan, which reports a surge in heavy arms use in populated areas and a sharp increase in sexual violence. Tuto Ngobeni has a story.
The ongoing civil war that erupted in Sudan since April 2023 between the Sudanese army led by Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the signatories of the Juba Peace Agreement, who believe they are being denied their fair share of the country's economic resources. At the heart of the dispute is the fierce competition over control of the Ministry of Minerals, which manages Sudan's vast wealth in gold and oil. In an update on the emergency in the Northeast African nation, the independent international fact-finding mission for Sudan highlighted the increased use of heavy weaponry in populated areas and a sharp rise in sexual violence. Expert member of the fact-finding mission, Joy Ngozi Ezelo, says many Sudanese are dying due to hunger.
Many Sudanese are dying from hunger, and especially those who have been detained. And in detention, they are dying, and the millions affected by absolute hunger is increasing by the day.
Ezelo urged all states to respect and enforce the arms embargo of the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1556.
In terms of international responsibility, we urge all states to respect and enforce the arms embargo under United Nations Security Council Resolution 1556.
Chair of the fact-finding mission, Mohammed Chande Othman, emphasized the direct link between the flow of arms in Sudan, armed hostilities, and the resulting violence amounting to violations of the international humanitarian law.
There is a direct link between the flow of arms in Sudan, armed hostilities, and the resulting violence amounting to violations of international humanitarian law and human rights violations. Now we know the kind of arms that are being used: heavy artillery, modern warfare, drones, and in fact they have escalated.
Meanwhile, fellow investigator Mona Rishmawi insisted that testimonies gathered pointed to both sides continuing to commit war crimes, a reference to the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, which turned on each other in April 2023 following a breakdown in transition to civilian rule.
Both sides are committing war crimes. We didn't say that SAF did not commit. We actually think SAF, particularly the bombardment and the shelling, indicate war crimes as well as torture.
Condemning the bombing of a United Nations aid convoy in Al-Qoma en route to El Fisher on the 2nd of June that killed 5 staff members, the fact-finding mission added that the RSF had shelled the Saudi hospital in El Fisher a dozen times, which Rishmawi says this has an impact on famine in the country.
The attack on these humanitarian workers and human rights defenders is really crippling the delivery of aid in a lot of these communities. It has impact on starvation, it has impact on famine, it has impact on access to basic things like food, like the kitchens that they actually organize.
In their latest update to the Human Rights Council, the investigators documented a sharp rise in sexual and gender-based violence, with women and girls subjected to rape, gang rape, abduction, sexual slavery, and forced marriage, mostly in RSF-controlled displacement camps. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Beni in Johannesburg.
And of course, from one troubling development to another, we look at the global consequences on banning anti-personnel landmines, once seen as a landmark achievement in humanitarian disarmament, the fact that they are under serious threat. As states gather this week in Geneva for key meetings on the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, the International Committee of the Red Cross has raised the alarm about a country signaling a possible withdrawal from the treaty. The ICRC President Mariana Spoljaric warns that such a retreat risks reversing decades of progress and putting countless civilians' lives at risk. Joining us now to speak about the stakes and legal implications, Fahad Ahmed, legal advisor at the International Committee of the Red Cross. A very good evening to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Good evening. Very happy to be here.
So let's start with the foundation of these intersessional meetings of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention that are taking place in Geneva this week. What is on the agenda?
So the intersessional meetings are generally normal meetings that take place during the year. These ones are quite significant because you have the possibility of 5 states signaling withdrawal from this convention. This is unprecedented. The only incident happened last year when one state withdrew from the convention on cluster munitions. And since then, it seems that there has been a slippery slope where other states have started to feel that perhaps it is okay to leave humanitarian disarmament treaties. On the agenda this week are the business of the day. It's the question on clearance. It's the question on stockpile destruction. But the very important question of the universalization of the convention, respecting the norm of the convention, is also on the agenda and will be discussed on Friday this week.
So how many countries are signatories? And you spoke of one withdrawing. How many do you fear could follow suit?
So today, the strength of the convention is 164 strong. 165th state, which is the Marshall Islands, has ratified the convention and will soon become a state party. So you almost have 80% of the world's states that are already members of this convention. Now there are 5 states, and these are mostly states from the Nordic regions of Europe and of the Baltic regions, who are signaling an intention to withdraw from this convention. These signals have come by way of parliamentary processes in the domestic jurisdictions. These have come by way of utterances by ministers of foreign affairs and prime ministers. But at this point in time, no formal indication has been made of withdrawing from the convention. And this is the main aim of this meeting, where international organizations and states that really feel the importance of banning this treaty are trying to convince and persuade the states that are making up their mind to leave the convention to stay within the fold of the convention to preserve our common humanity.
So what argument is being used to drive home that point? I know the ICRC said in the 1980s that landmines were an epidemic, a worldwide epidemic, saying then that approximately 24,000 people, mostly civilians, were being killed and wounded each year by landmines. What are the statistics today, and which countries exemplify the greatest population or existence of landmines?
I think that's a very good question. And what I want to say is that whatever conditions existed in the 1990s, which led to this convention, also exist now. Mines continue to be dangerous. Mines continue to have indiscriminate effects, which means that mines still, anti-personnel mines still don't distinguish between who is a soldier and who is a civilian. And that continues to be the case. What also now causes problems is the fact that if states start to withdraw and all of a sudden there is a normalization of the use of landmine, which is a stigma to this day. Whenever a state uses landmines, it's a stigma that they have to deal with. If it starts becoming normalized, you will see a proliferation of people and civilians getting more and more affected. More than 85% of the casualties of landmines are civilians. And this is not only at the time of armed conflict, but it continues to affect civilians more than 40, 50 years after the mines have been emplaced in the ground. The clearance of landmines is extremely slow. It's extremely painful. Mines move if there are earthquakes, floods, snowfall, and therefore even if an area is marked very well, because of these geographical changes and natural changes, mines tend to move from one place or the other. The ICRC has been responding to this in Cambodia, for example, where these mines were placed almost 50 years ago. And even now, the people who come to our physical rehabilitation center are people who have been injured by landmines. So you can imagine that 50 years hence, civilians continue to get affected. And therefore, the statistics are extremely clear. More than 85% of the people affected by mines, most of them civilians, women, men, and children, and they are all disproportionately affected. The same arguments continue. States would want to make other arguments now to say that the mines have changed, that the technology has improved, but experience of international organizations in the field, experience of mine clearance organizations in the field will tell you that there is still a lot of mines. Even the newly placed mines are not technologically advanced. They still continue to have the same humanitarian consequences as the ones in the past.
Just out of curiosity, what are the arguments that are being made by states who are either skeptical or whose murmurings point to a lack of commitment to ban landmines, especially if you say, I see your report says more than about 50% of patients visiting physical rehabilitation centers of this ERC are mine survivors. You spoke about Cambodia. Apparently the pattern is the same in Afghanistan. Knowing that these horrific occurrences still occur, so to speak, why are countries hesitant or not committed to bringing an end to this, especially given the fact that, as you say, upon signing the convention, you saw incidents of this drop by something like 75%?
That's absolutely correct. And it's a very good question. That despite all the evidence, there is continued use of landmines. Now, you have 165 states that have now committed to the convention. You have 32 odd states that have not done so. It has been our endeavor to go and engage with these 32 states to ensure that they also comply to some extent by the norm of this convention. So even if they haven't joined it, many states have moratoriums on the use of mines. Some of them have kept these mines for research purposes. And you see that there is a stigma that's attached to these landmines. Some of the arguments that states are now placing is that they need these mines for border security, that they need these mines for defending their sovereignty, that these mines have now become quite modernized. They are not the mines that were around in the 90s, that technology has advanced, and therefore the new mines, so to speak, that are available would not fall within the remit of the convention. Now, these are all arguments that are based from test conditions. In a test condition, you might have a mine that may perform very, very well, but we know that reality is not the same. A lot can differ depending on what terrain the mine is laid on, what are the geographical conditions, what are the climatic conditions, is there floods? In the heat of the battle, obviously nothing is done in perfection, which is done during test conditions. And there's overwhelming evidence to suggest that all the new technology that is now being suggested was around in the 90s. And all of those arguments were debunked. So at this point in time, there is no real argument to support landmines, save from any political move that states would like to make to show that they are very prepared and fully ready to defend themselves with all means that are available. I think it's the shifting of the political narrative, which is unfortunately having a negative impact on a treaty which is purely humanitarian in nature.
And that's what I wanted to ask next, that are there any means of holding states to account who withdraw their being signatories to the convention? Because I just can't imagine that. Explosives of any kind around civilians are devastating, are dangerous, and people who might not have seen that. I remember one of the haunting stories I covered was a munitions factory explosion in Brazzaville in the Republic of Congo, exploding in a civilian area. It was a terrifying story to cover.
No, that's absolutely correct, and I think there is an accountability mechanism, of course, but also treaties are laws that states agree to bind themselves with. This treaty, like all other treaties, also provides for the possibility for states to leave the treaty. It is a sovereign right for states to either join international law or to leave international law. The most important part, so legally there may not be an impediment, but I think there is a very, very strong moral and ethical reason not to leave these treaties. Because what it does is, in the end, you end up hurting your own civilians more than hurting the adversary. That is the rate that you have. Your own people get affected by these mines when they want to go till the land to grow wheat, when they want to go fetch firewood, when they want to go to build houses. They are the ones that get affected the most. And it's to protect your own civilians, to protect all people, these weapons were banned. And they were banned for a very, very specific reason. We cannot now reinvent new reasons to agree that it's normal to use them, because it's a slippery slope. What are we going to say next? Are we going to say that it's okay to use chemical weapons again? Are we going to say it's okay to use biological weapons again? we cannot move towards this discussion where anything can go when it comes to defending your territory. There has to be some level of humanity still left, even in armed conflict or war.
On that profound note, Fahad, let me thank you for your time and sharing that with us. Fahad Ahmed, legal advisor at the International Committee of the Red Cross, speaking to us about the urgent need to uphold the global ban on anti-personal landmines. You are listening to Channel Africa, Africa World Hour, the African Perspective.
Stella Longwe, Pamalonje.
Palitu sokoma pano pamalonje. Kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa, kusangalala, kupeza moyo. Akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino. Pano pamalonje. Ndiyetu apa tili ndikatswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa. Ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi. Yatusati kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwino kwambiri. Chiliyonse chikutheka ndithu bwino.
Ayi aziwoneka chiliyonse chikutheka mofa magrasi anu apa mwaka. Akuti kumenya yonse aziwoneka zoti azikutheka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
Malonje, panthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
And it is 27 minutes to 10 now. You are still listening to Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, bringing you the very latest news from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe, and to East Africa now, where in Kenya tensions remain high following the death of a man during protests in Nairobi on Tuesday. Demonstrations sparked by the killing of a 31-year-old blogger and teacher Albert Ojwang while in police custody. Graphic videos have surfaced showing police brutally attacking them during the protests, further fueling public outrage over alleged extrajudicial killings by security forces. And we will speak to in just a moment our colleague Alex Kiari, Channel Africa's correspondent who is in Nairobi, and to just find out from him the very latest. Alex, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but are you able to tell us exactly what the mood is like in Kenya at the moment, and just how high are those tensions?
Actually, right now the mood is of anger. People, everybody, members of the public are wondering what's really going on with the police force following the incidents that happened earlier today. And it is actually becoming more of frustration now than expected. Not just more frustrating, actually, if I may just say that, to conclude it.
Alexa, I am going to just ask you to turn your screen around so that, there we go. I think now we can see you better. So tell us a little bit more about, we mentioned the fact that there are videos that are surfacing about the police conduct during the protests. Exactly what happened, and what has been the response of the government with regards to the police's behavior?
The National Police Service released a statement earlier today, actually at around 6 p.m. East African time, condemning the incident that happened to one of the vendors today who was selling face masks during the protests along one of the streets in the central business district of Nairobi, who was later on confronted by two police officers, and one of them shot him in the head. And as he fell to the ground, the two officers walked away, leaving him to his own device. And the statement condemned that incident and acknowledged that that was an oversight, and that the officer involved has since been arrested, and he has since been identified as one Benjamin Tanui, who was attached to one of the police stations in the outskirts of the city.
So, Alex, just for clarification before you continue, are you saying police shot an unarmed street hawker with live ammunition at the head?
Yes, he was shot in the head at point blank range, and he was actually not armed. He did not resist arrest. He was basically selling the face masks to the protesters, just like it happens every time there is a protest. And the two officers just confronted him as he tried to pin himself on one of the doors of the shops. And also, that aside, after that shooting, they left him there as he fell to the ground and then walked away. And he was later on taken to one of the referral hospitals in the city center. So he is actually, according to the Kenya's Director of Medical Services, he is currently undergoing a neurosurgical procedure, but his condition is said to be critical as we speak.
I would imagine that it would be critical, and I'm actually stunned to hear the state categorize the shooting as an oversight. As I say, I'm speechless. What is the reaction of the protesters who were actually there to protest the killing of Albert Ojwang, which police claim was a result of self-harm?
Actually, this incident happened under the full glare of the media, and protesters who were recording it, and the officer involved didn't seem to care, just that they did whatever they did and then walked away. And it is actually elicited a stormy reaction, anger, frustration. And as I said, people are wondering what's going on with the police force. Remember that in April, two courts made some interesting rulings that involved or that required police officers manning protests not to wear any facial masks or any covering in the face, and to display the police force members openly and to be in official uniform. Another court ruling also ordered the police not to use live ammunition, rubber bullets, or even tear gas. But this has been happening, and some very interesting aspect of it is that the protesters were coming out against police brutality, which was meted out on them as they did the same, because whatever they were calling out against or they were calling out did actually happen in one of them under the full glare of the media. And this in itself has actually sent shockwaves across the country. And actually, we're expecting more reactions tomorrow based on the number of press invites that we're seeing around here since this incident happened late in the evening, and the videos actually started circulating at around 7 p.m. Kenyan time, and this in itself has made the reaction to be so shocking, and actually it's still trending in the social media platforms.
Alex, let's leave it there. Shocking developments. I must say, very rarely am I so moved by a story of such blatant police brutality. I would say that's exactly what it is. Alex Kiari, Channel Africa's correspondent in Nairobi, telling us about the protests that occurred in Kenya today. They were to protest the death of a blogger, Albert Ojwang, in police custody. And today, as you heard from our colleague there, that a policeman shot point blank in the head a street hawker who was selling masks live in the glare of the media and everyone else who was recording it, and simply walked away. And police are now categorizing the incident as an oversight, even though they say that the man will be arrested. Well, let's leave it there. It's 20 minutes to 10.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Channel Africa.
Right, let's continue now with the World Council of Churches holding key meetings in Johannesburg this month, bringing together global church leaders to focus on justice, climate action and unity. The gathering also marks major historical anniversaries linked to Africa and the global church. Joining us now is Dr. Gustav Claassen, South African coordinator for the World Council of Churches, to speak to us about this meeting, what it means for the region and, of course, the global ecumenical movement. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Dr. Gustav.
Thank you so much, Tapisha, and thank you for the opportunity.
So tell us a little bit about the WCC, the Executive and Central Committee meetings here. What is it in light of, and tell us a little bit more about the local and global context that the church meets under today as we speak.
The WCC is the biggest, what we call the ecumenical body in the world. It represents approximately 500 million people from all over the world, from different religious traditions, denominations, and they have their central committee meeting in South Africa from the 18th until the 23rd. So we as South Africans feel that we are very blessed to have this meeting in South Africa, to host them, because they are also during the meeting there's also programs that is sort of trying to interact with the South African churches. For example, the devotions every day will be led by South Africans. And on Sunday, the 22nd, the delegates of this meeting will visit some local congregations and worship with them. So, it's a big occasion for South Africa. And we are looking forward to this week and to what is on the agenda and the outcomes.
Just from with its theological, philosophical perspective, how will the WCC engage local churches around justice and reconciliation, particularly about the fact that South Africa, for instance, is marking 140 years since the Berlin Convention, and it's also 40 years since the Kairos Theological Statement. Can you just expand a little bit more on the WCC's thinking and what it's likely to say along these lines?
Yeah, I think there's two very important happenings in history is basically the backdrop for this meeting. And against this backdrop, we will contemplate what can we learn from the Berlin Conference, what can we learn, from the Nicene, also Nicene, the oldest confession, is 1,700 years old this year, and the aim, one of the aims of this particular confession is church unity. So these particular historic events will be the backdrop and will be the motivation for this meeting. To embrace once again the journey of pilgrimage of striving for unity and reconciliation, that's the role that it will play.
And if we're talking about unity, then it must have within it acceptance, forgiveness, and obviously the requisite moral correctitude to unify the church as a body, irrespective of denomination. Now, one of the most polarizing issues that we are seeing at our time is what is happening in Palestine, occupied Palestinian territory, and the attacks on people who are at aid camps by Israel. What is the WCC's position on this?
That is one of the very important points on the agenda of the Central Committee meeting. So a lot of time will be spent on this issue, and so I think all of us who's part of this meeting are looking forward for guidance from this meeting and the resolutions that will be taken to help us as well, on our views on the whole Israel-Gaza issue at stake at this stage. Yeah.
Mm. And just a final question: what would the message be to those listening about the role of the church in such troubling times like this? I mean, we spoke about climate change, but there are also quote-unquote climatic changes if we look at geopolitics and how it's pitting people against each other, what's happening between South Africa and the US, for instance, the conflict we're seeing in areas like the DRC, in the Sudan, horrific incidents happening there.
Yeah, I think the message will be basically that we will not only take resolutions, formulate it in very, very detailed resolutions on these issues, but that the churches were also very pragmatic and to put projects and process in place and inviting their followers to join in this efforts or processes, so that we can bring hope to a world who needs hope, to bring reconciliation and to bring justice. So I think the message to our congregants, our members of the different churches of the different traditions, to in unity approach and seek solutions for these very, very challenging issues that is facing the world at this stage on a very, very broad spectrum.
Dr. Gustav Claassen, thank you very much, South African coordinator for the World Council of Churches, about their upcoming meeting. And given some of what we've been talking about today, one does believe and agrees that we certainly need prayer. It's 12 minutes to 10.
Africa at Play with NATO and ETO chairman.
The Confederation of African Athletics, the CAA President, Mr. Hamad Kalkaba Malboum, talk to us about the state of athletics in Africa as it stands, and what picture are you looking at 5 years later?
Yeah, athletics in Africa is strong. We are able to organize our major events in time. Like this year, we will have the under-20 and under-18 African Championship in Nigeria. Next year, we will have the senior in Ghana. In 2027, we will go back to Algeria to organize the under-18 and under-20. And then 2028, we will have the senior championship in Gaborone in Botswana. Well, by this program, we can increase our performance. And at the same time, we are considering the fact that within the various federations, they are identifying young talent every year within their national program, within the scholarship championship. And so the athletics in Africa is in good standard.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
And as we round up Africa World Hour, 10 minutes to 10, today we turn the spotlight on a very pressing public health issue, one that affects millions across the globe, but it's particularly hard in Nigeria: sickle cell disease. Despite medical advancements and growing awareness, sickle cell remains a life-threatening condition especially for children born in sub-Saharan Africa, where access to early diagnosis and treatment remains alarmingly limited, with Nigeria recording the highest number of newborns affected by sickle cell. So to explore the science, the stigma, the solutions, we're joined now by Dr. Maureen Achebe, Associate Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School and Clinical Director of Hematology at Brigham and Women's Hospital. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us, Dr. Achebe.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here.
You've just recently returned from Nigeria, where you addressed a gathering on the alarming number of sickle cell cases in Nigeria. And I just want to look at the figures, the prevalence thereof, particularly among newborns. What are the figures, and why is it carrying the disproportionate, if I may say, burden of sickle cell amongst newborns?
Yeah, so I would, in Nigeria every year, so in sub-Saharan Africa every year, there are 300,000 newborns with sickle cell disease, and about 50% of those, so 150,000 of those babies are born in Nigeria. And this has to do with the population of Nigeria and the fact that malaria is endemic and has been endemic in West Africa and sub-Saharan Africa for thousands of years. The sickle gene, which is a hereditary gene, was the body's evolution to fatal malaria. So individuals who have one dose of that gene, have sickle trait, are less likely to die of malaria. Unfortunately, when an individual gets 2 doses of the sickle gene, then you have sickle cell disease, which does not protect you from malaria and causes a severe disease that we know as sickle cell disease. The sickle cell disease is now seen all over the world, but the gene evolved 3 different times in sub-Saharan Africa, and 1 time in the Mediterranean and South Asia. So these are areas of more prevalence of the disease, although it's seen in the United States, in the UK, and everywhere with migration over years.
Interestingly enough, my first exposure to sickle cell and what it really is was through watching an American hospital drama series. And, it's just fascinating to hear you explain what the origins thereof are. So what is the mortality rate, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa? And if you could also just tell us about the advancements in gene therapy to treat this.
So yeah, sickle cell disease remains a significant contributor to under 5 mortality in sub-Saharan Africa. In the United States, in the 1970s, for instance, the median life expectancy for an individual with sickle cell disease was 10 years of age. But with advances in therapy and supportive care, the median life expectancy is somewhere in the 50s. So market improvement. Unfortunately, we have not made those gains in sub-Saharan Africa, so that a baby who is born with sickle cell disease in sub-Saharan Africa has a 50 to almost 90% chance of succumbing to that disease prior to their 5th birthday. This is why there's been a push for newborn screening, which is currently nationwide, at least in the United States and in some Western countries, and is really instrumental in getting beyond the significant mortality that this disease can cause when it's not diagnosed. Under 5 mortality is contributed to by a severe pneumonia, pneumococcal pneumonia, and malaria. And this is much more likely to happen if the baby is not diagnosed. A baby who is born with sickle cell disease looks completely normal, completely healthy. There's no way to tell that the baby has the gene, but to test all babies and test babies who look fine in order to give some preventative antibiotics, give antimalarials, folic acid. These things go a significant way to improving, chances of getting to adulthood and beyond. In December 2023, 2 gene therapies for sickle cell disease were approved in the United States. With much fanfare because of the scientific advancement of being able to manipulate genes in a way to improve disease.
So I want to look at the costs. I believe that they are quite prohibitive generally, but for low-income resource countries like Nigeria and others in sub-Saharan Africa, what advancements are being made or can be made to make it more accessible to reduce the incidence thereof?
Yeah, I would say, gene therapy is exciting because of what it is. It's expensive, even in the United States. It's brand new therapy, right? FDA approved less than 2 years ago. So we really are taking baby steps to look at the short-term and long-term outcomes of individuals who get gene therapy. It is the costs are prohibitive, even in the United States. Insurance makes it more likely to be covered and to be affordable by some individuals, but it still poses a problem. I think that the biggest bang for our buck in sub-Saharan Africa would be identifying the babies. Actually, for gene therapy, first we need to identify individuals who have the disease. Like I said, antibiotics, a drug called hydroxyurea that was FDA approved in the United States in 1998 and has since been tested in Uganda, Angola, number of countries in randomized trials to show that it is safe and effective in improving the life expectancy, mortality, and morbidity of individuals with sickle cell disease. So I would really advocate for us to take those steps while the world is watching to see what the long-term outcomes for gene therapy will be. So we don't have those answers yet because it's so new. It has worked magnificently acutely. So we know that gene therapy does what we expect it to do acutely, but we really never know for medications and for treatments what will the long-term effects, side effects will be. So I think, I don't think it's not, and we're doing gene therapy cautiously in the United States, and we'd expect cautious implementation anywhere it started, while we more aggressively undertake providing patients with therapies that have been on the market and have been effective for decades and that we know make a difference.
Dr. Achebe, I really think this discussion deserves more time. Unfortunately, we have run out of it because I was curious to hear about other emerging treatments through technology and the role that people play in reducing sickle cell. But I do thank you greatly for your time to speak to us about the high rates of sickle cell disease in Nigeria, the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, and what mitigating action is being taken. Dr. Maureen Achebe is Associate Professor of Medicine at Harvard Medical School and Clinical Director of Hematology at Brigham and Women's Hospital. She recently addressed that gathering in Nigeria to speak about why the numbers there are so high. So we've just got about 30 seconds to go. Shayla Ndukumana joining us for Hotlines up next. So what's coming up on the program, Shayla?
So the very first hour, we have an opportunity to speak to leaders who are looking to change the realities of unemployment in South Africa, of course, targeting the youth. and these will be the voices of none other than Tumelo Mpolokeng, who is the CEO of the John Taolo Kgaitsewe Development District, as well as Matlhako Mahapa, the founder and the director of Punyatsela. And then Digify Africa is doing something really interesting. They are looking to build a chatbot that speaks to you on WhatsApp about financial literacy. So I'm looking forward to that. Imagine learning via WhatsApp.
Aren't we learning via technology every day about everything?
Listen, it's become overwhelming.
AI just, whether you know it or not, is insidiously in your life, in everything that you do. So sooner or later, we won't even have to open our mouths.
No, I highly doubt that.
We'll lose jobs.
No, thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much, Shayla. Shayla Ndukumana is coming up in just a moment. Do stay tuned. This is Africa World Hour. That's it from us. Up next, Hotlines.
Hotlines bring you fresh perspectives about love after dark. With Shayla Ndukumana.
Dieu merci pour moi, je savais chanter un peu haut.